was not using the correct microphone, but now I am, so it should be fine. Hello, hello, welcome in. Wolf Alone, Sorceress Apprentice. I'm just gonna call you Apprentice. Welcome in, you guys. Blaze, welcome in. DM Chris. Hello, hello. Thank you all for being part of the early crew. It's great to see you. And Longshot, welcome back for month 38. Man, oh man, it's tough to believe that TLG has been streaming that long. It's crazy. How are all y'all doing? It's good to see you too, Apprentice. I am very excited to jump back into story time today. I'm very excited. Because last we left off, we were exploring how the horned god Unklar made his way to Aihrde and began his 1,000-year rule. And there's this really obscure concept that I'm not sure a lot of people know of. It's called hubris. And very underground sort of concept. But yeah, Trigal the mage had this little thing called hubris, and a lot of it, and turned into his evil self. Malazor was the name he chose for himself. Thank you for doing this. I'm happy to be here. This is super exciting. Most people don't know this, but the Winter Dark was actually late due to congestion on I-70. Yeah, there was a big traffic backup. Yeah, they were about 40 minutes late due to traffic. Unfortunately. Man, there have been these constant, kind of summer showers all day, and it's awesome. And we live up high, so we're able to see, the rain clouds coming in. It's great, and one's coming in right now, and it looks just like a wall of water just approaching. I know about hubris. I made hubris my bitch. I'm so cool. Some might say the coolest and the best and the most powerful ever to live. Some people say that about me. Basically, hubris has got nothing on me because I'm so great. But yeah, so Trigal the mage took on the name Malazor. After being ousted from, I think, the Enochian court. The Emperor Marcus the Sixth, Cobbler's Age, I forget which region it was. Whichever one the Seven Rivers are on. But yeah, he was ousted. His apprentices fired and or tortured to discover his research. But Malazor, through all of this, did end up getting exactly what he wanted, which was the knowledge of how to traverse the plains and how to enter the void. Being, in fact, I think the first mortal ever to do it, besides Andoroth, the dwarf sailor. And so basically, Malazor shows up in the void and sees a speck. He sees a spot on the void, darker than the void. And he's like, I bet it's friendly. If I bring some treats, I bet it's friendly. This thing that reeks of evil and chaos, I bet it'll listen to me. I bet I can control it. And so that's what he's going to set out to do. And we will start reading this in a moment. But how are y'all doing? How's your week been? Hoping we'll get some showers later in the week. Thoughts and prayers, especially for Oklahoma, because destructive storms are inbound. I hate to hear that. Fingers crossed for you. Big storms are awesome if you're in a position where you don't have to deal with them. They're great to simply witness. In my hometown, there were a bunch of floods that happened within the span of I think 3 or 5 years. Just one right after the other, the biggest flood since the 30s. And a lot of it came from just egregious amounts of rain. And so many people's houses were destroyed. Water damage is no joke. Had a bit of a nap, which turned into about 6 hours long. It sounds about right. Same thing happens when I nap. Hey, Mortal! Hello, hello! I'll just be lurking. I'm so happy that you're here, my friend. Thanks for stopping by. We're about to get started in just a little bit here, but we're just kind of hanging out first. That sounds like my day today. A 6-hour nap. Man, I have a hard time napping. I don't know if any of y'all also suffer with this, but they don't make me feel better. And also, if I lay down to try to nap in the daytime, I get so stressed thinking about what I should be doing instead that I can't actually fall asleep. So it doesn't really work out unless I'm sick. What is this rain thing I keep hearing about? Southern New Mexico, Arrakis. Rain? What? Huh? Man, well, fingers crossed that you get a little bit of rain someday soon. I'm in the time of my life where I don't nap, I just go to bed 6 hours early. Yeah, there you go. See? And honestly, I think that would be really fun to do. Because just think about it. So you go to sleep at 6 p.m. and then you have your full night of sleep, and then you wake up hella early in the morning, and then you just have this big long early morning where you get to do whatever you want and start your day. And yeah, I think that sounds great. Hey Ryan, thanks for tuning in from Facebook. It's good to see ya. Arrakis has more shade, but seriously, where did this windstorm come from? Is Arrakis from Dune? I've not seen Dune, but it sounds like maybe it's from Dune. I'm getting a nod from over top the computer, so I assume it's from Dune. I've not seen Dune, but that... It is Dune. Okay. All of the dunes are on Arrakis. Got it. Breakfast at 3 a.m. is a thing that I enjoy. Yeah, oh my god. All right. Nick and I have been saying that we want to get up super, super hella early and go to a diner someday soon. Never a drop of rain. That's where you, Dune is they've got the things on their backs that recycle their sweat and make it into drinkable water. And then, their pee and stuff also, right?
It's like a whole bodysuit.
It's a whole bodysuit. It rained every day last week except Sunday here. Was it cozy? Because that sounds cozy. Dude, I love rainstorms. Except when you have to drive in them, then the magic is worn thin, but... You gotta watch the 80s Dune. Okay, I can watch the 80s Dune. I like 80s movies. Is it better? We had tornadoes, too. Less cozy. That's not quite so cozy. I'm sorry to hear it. I hope that the damage is, minimal and that everyone's okay. It's one of the biggest train wrecks ever, and it's glorious. Ooh, the 80s Dune movies. Watch the 80s Dune movie by David Lynch. You'll understand all these Dune references. Sting is in it. Say no more. I want to get stung. That's stupid. Sorry. They all went around town. Yikes. Man, the first time... Let's get into our childhood right now. The first time I ever felt truly... just the black pit of fear in my stomach, the first time I was ever truly afraid was we had just learned about tornadoes, and this was the second grade, I think, first or second grade, And this like shithead kid that was sitting next to me was like, oh yeah, tornadoes, my dad told me about those. And I was like, oh yeah? Yeah. And he basically told me that tornadoes are alive, they're like animals, and they will on purpose look for small people, like little girls, and pick them up on purpose and drop them into like forest fires. And that was the first time I was ever like afraid for my life. Like, okay, if a tornado comes through, that's why they tell you to like get under your desk and hide, because if the tornado sees you, it's gonna pick you up and drop you in the fire. Like, dude, that's fucked up. Why would you tell me that? I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl. I'm 6. Don't tell me that. Best place to people watch is a diner at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. The crazies and the working folks intersect. It is a show you'll never unsee. I love it. I love the conversations with strangers at diners. I truly do. Dino De Laurentiis produced it. Who is that? In one of my fantasy worlds, tornadoes are actually alive. Ah! Oh god! Tell me about it. That may not be true of little girls, but they do seem to pick on trailer parks. Oh, buddy. 100% true. Oh, God. What was that kid's name? Grant? From first grade? Is that you? '80s doing hot, bald, psychic space whores. You have just described me. You've described me, my friend. It sounds great. Sounds like a jerk kid. I'm sure he grew up to be a politician. I'm not sure where he ended up, actually. I have not checked in on people from school in my hometown. Maybe I should. Don't you just wink coyly, Starlaw. You're supposed to be upholding the star law. I'm reporting you. You're in here preying on my fragile sensibilities. Spooking my inner child. Unbelievable. But here's the thing. So we're here to talk about Aihrde. Speaking of scary stories to tell in the dark. Conan the Barbarian. That's another one that I need to read up on. It's so important to TLG, and I don't know anything about Conan the Barbarian. But anyway, so we're reading about Aihrde. Aihrde being the world, kind of the canon setting in which Troll Lord Games publishes, and of course Castles and Crusades is a gaming system. You can play it in any world. Aihrde is just ours, but it has a lot of lore, and it's a great world, so we're reading about it. From the Codex of Aihrde after Winter Dark. Winter Dark, of course, being the 1,000-year rule that Onklar, the Horned God, enacted on the people of Aihrde after he was brought to the material plane by a very proud and evil wizard, who we have just learned about. His name was Trigal. He was a court wizard, though after trying to fly a bit too high above his station, was basically exiled. He took on the name Malazor and formed something. Well, he formed this order. I think it's called the White Order. The White Lotus. It was the white. It was white. It was super white. What was the name of this thing? He disbanded the order. What order? Oh God. Either way, whatever. I can't find it. It's fine. The White Lotus is... but shit, damn it. I'm crossing my wires. Anyway, he, while in the service of this court, founded an order of wizards that was disbanded when he was exiled, and as he kind of grew his own personal power in exile, he brought the order back to continue his research. His research being, of course, ways to cross from the material plane into the void, where it said the Allfather created the world of Aihrde and everything else that's significant happened. And he found a way to do this. He did venture into the void, and there he saw in the far-flung, distant, far away corners of the void, a darker than void splotchy thing. And thought to himself that he would like to bring this to Aihrde in his service, bound in his service, thinking that it was kind of like a demon that he could bind to him. And with the power of this demon, he would become a god king and rule the world and all this stuff. It was in ignorance that he set about to bring this terror to Aihrde, is how our last little section ended. So we're going to pick it back up here. Going to keep on hearing about Malazor and his misadventures. And it's going to be a cozy time. So hang out, grab yourself a cozy beverage, get a blanket or a sweater, hop into whatever kind of task you want to do today, and we are going to hang out and just read. Trolza. Malazor built a tower in a cleft upon the far western reaches of the Holmgrad Mountains. This country was wild, occupied by no men, only trolls and stone giants. The tower rose about him, built upon the natural cliffs. He named it Ur. There, Malazor set to fashioning a magical staff that bore the paths of Umbra upon it, and he called it the Winter Rune, and with it he opened many gates into the firmament and maelstrom, these being places in the void. These gates he bound in a pillar of iron within Ur, and ordered them for his own use. Each of the portals he locked in the iron tower, bound within a mirror, and with these he could pass from one realm to another, and even to places in Aihrde. And in after days, the most secret lay in the mirror behind the throne in Aliosh. At last, he stepped through the portals, through the wall, and into the void, and with the Winter Rune traveled to the distant darkness. The stain upon the empty lingered there, cast as little more than a moment of the Allfather's reckoning, and it pretended to be amazed and enthralled at the wizard, and all the wizard said to him. But the darkness wove about Malazor, and it sought to bind the Magi. The sorcerer was no fool, and he saw then that the darkness bore more than a little mark of intelligence. Though Malazor did not fear the darkness, he marked it as more aware than he initially thought, and he decided that he must be more careful and bind the creature with greater dwellers. But the darkness bound him in the undeeps of the void. When Malazor returned to Aihrde, he fashioned 13 rods, each woven with runic sorcery. Spells, fell and powerful, laced the rods and set a trap for the darkness. In this way, Malazor hoped to safeguard himself. But he was deceived, for the mark of the creature's power was in him, and it poisoned all that he did. Through incantations and sorcerous somatics, Malazor began preparing the conjurations that lay the groundwork to the paths of Umbra, and in so doing, alerted other magi, far more cautious than he. Patrice of the Wood lived a simple life in the Kellerwald forest, south of Aliosh, and knew of the White Order. It's just called the White Order. All that, just for it to be called the White Order. And much of its doings. Patrice was a powerful wizard and a goodly man. He kept to himself largely, seeking only a greater understanding of the world and its origins. As such, he unraveled the arc of time and had some foreknowledge of what the future held. Patrice studied Malazor and his confederates. Sorry about that, music got a little loud. Patrice studied Malazor and his confederates, and in this way learned of the paths of Umbra and the making of the Winter Rune. He set out to stop them, gathering a band of sorcerers from across the lands of Ethram and Enoch to combat the White Order, and they called themselves the Elarios, which is, those who stand upon the wall in the Vulgate. These were the very early days of the Great Adventures, where men rose from obscurity to rule kingdoms in both Ethram and Enoch. The greatest of these was Luther the Paladin, not the Palatine, called the Gallant, of the minor house of Herne. His people dwelt north of the Vale of Jeriel, and were counted as one of the oldest families of the Ethram, with a lineage buried in time. A big wall of rain is coming in right now. It's awesome. He rose through a wash of blood and battle to become king of Ethram, ruling lands that covered much of the old Ethvold. He slew the last of the Tarvish in a single combat to seize the crown. He called his realm Keomar, harking back to the early days of his people, and the brother of Aidgen that died so long ago. His became a powerful, if short-lived, line, but the foundation for all that came after. Riding at his side were a group of companions who the gods fated to ride the crest of history beyond the winter dark. With Luther rode Daladon Half-Elven, son of the elf Lothian, Dagnir the dwarf, grandnephew of and future king of Norgorod Cam, Aristobulus the white mage, and others. Many of their boon companions died, victims of many adventures, lost now to the annals of time. Many more rose and remained as powerful men throughout the lands of Orsal. The greatest of these, Robert Luther, Luther's son, became Keomar's greatest king. Jaren the monk, founder of the Order of the Scintillant Dawn, penned the very prophecy that foretold the winter dark. And Aristobulus's apprentice Rapscallion, who bore the mark of emperors, succumbed to the designs and greed of the White Order and brought the winter dark to Aihrde. Patrice looked to these. Forever did that wizard command the sight of the future. He saw in Luther a connection with the blade Durendale. In Daladon he saw more, for the Marcher Lord, as he was known to some, would in years come to lay with Wenifar, the fairy queen, and sire the demigod Utumno. And he saw Aristobulus, who would become the greatest wizard of any time, save for perhaps Malazor. Seeing these futures, Patrice brought them into his fold and council, and made them his allies in the war against the White Order. For years, Ilarios struggled against the White Order, seeking to confound Malazor's plans. They met tragedy and sorrow, overcame obstacles to win unsung victories, suffered defeats and death. The war was not one of states and kings, but of men, singly and in pairs, of wizard duels, of personal battles deep in dungeons or upon the heights of lost towers. The struggle raged for years. The tales of these battles are legendary and defy the capacity of the chronicles. Luther battled dragons in dark caves, spouting flame and death. Aristobulus matched Malazor with spells within spells in a grim contest of sorcery which lit the very heavens. Daladon hewed giants like wheat to claim the last sapling of Mordias's grove. It was an age where innocents died, and when the avenging sword, Durandale, returned, these were days of action, days of struggle, an age of heroes. Patrice's council consisted of 12 wizards of like power. The most notable of those who came into the tales of these days were Chrysogrim, who in later years traveled the seas of time upon the blood runes, Helios, the singing fool, Ozana, the black-hearted, Segramor, who, through the curses of Malazor and the Horned God, fathered the race of blood thieves, the vampires, and Aristobulus, called the White Mage, greatest of the Ilarios. These magi, their servants, and the kings of Kaomar waged a ceaseless battle with Malazor and the White Order. The war came to a head in 706 OY, when Aristobulus's apprentice turned mage, Rapscallion, knowing the truth of the mark of emperors that he bore, turned on his master, betrayed his friends, and sought out the counsel of Malazor. Malazor led him in the destruction of all the pretenders to the throne of Aliosh, and sought to set himself above all others. The noble lords of Enoch, who kept a long memory of the god emperors and the wars of liberation, rejected the mark, and sought to unseat the beggar prince, as they named him. So, war spread across Enoch, and towns and cities took sides to fight bitter battles. After several years, the beggar prince came to Aliosh with his army, and cleansed it of any who opposed him. He took the palace, although he would not take the throne, nor the crown that sat upon the high seat all those years, for he deemed that the time was not ripe. In this, Rapscallion spurned Malazor's advice. The wizard saw a quick end to the civil war of the Enochians. He saw then that in the west the Ethram crowned Luther the Paladin, who now ruled over the mighty kingdom of Kaomar. The paladins of the Holy Order of the Flame gave him allegiance, as did elves and dwarves and other diverse people. The beggar prince would not heed the mage. Indeed, he spurned all of the White Order and scattered them on missions hither and yon, seeking to win by strength alone. He longed to contest arms with the Westerners for a hatred of his one-time master Aristobulus. The king in Kaomar and all his comrades had settled upon him. The beggar prince gathered his armies and commenced the conquest of his kingdom. War flamed across the lands of Enoch. In the chaos and terror of those days, none could predict the outcome. War again consumed the lands of Ursal, and the power of the sorcerer Rapscallion and the White Order seemed unstoppable. In 718 OY, Rapscallion, having conquered most of Enoch, at last felt the time ripe and took the throne in Aliosh. He placed the Cune Mundus Usquam upon his own brow, proclaiming himself God Emperor of Enoch and Lord of Ethram, though that land lay far beyond his reach. When Rapscallion took up the crown and placed it on his head, no affliction came upon him, and this he took as a sign that only the true heir might ascend the throne. Though many had attempted it before, none had survived the crown's curse, for of old it was bound to the line of the god emperors, and it, too, bore the mark of darkness upon it as set by Narhite so many years ago. The emperor took the name Sebastian Oliver I. With these proclamations, Rapscallion, the beggar prince, Sebastian, brought upon himself the wrath of the council of Patrice and the kings in the west, most notably King Luther in the high-towered halls of Gulisan of Keomar. War followed. We move next into the War of the Straits. It was in these years that the elves began to discuss leaving Aihrde and traveling through the rings of brass to their ancient lands of the Seven Rivers, for they saw the coming of a dark and cold age. Many of their lords gathered in a great moot at the feet of Queen Adavia of Elaam, and debated the merits of remaining to aid those gathering against the new emperor, or returning to the land of Seven Rivers. The loss of life was strange to them, for they were deathless, whereas men were not. The elves, too, never understood the judgment of Corthane, and how it made men seek hurriedly for a vanity that they never attained. The Prince of Lothian, who dwelt in power even in the shadow of Keomar, sought most of all to leave the world, for he had quarreled bitterly with his half-human son Daladon, and wished nothing more than to rid himself of the pain of his quarrel and the world itself. Oops. Many stood by Prince Lothian, his son Meltaug, lords and ladies, and many of the host besides. The elven sorcerers joined their voices to his, for they had seen the Arc of Time and foretold the coming of the dark. For all of their foreknowledge and wisdom, the elves hesitated. With Enoch behind him, Sebastian moved south, conquering the coastal duchies and the Isle of Vilshofen. His armies began the construction of a fleet to protect his southern conquests. While the construction was underway, the emperor turned his attention to the west. He absorbed the peoples of the Red River valleys in several short but brutal campaigns. After that, he passed beneath the Vorarlberg Mountains, following an ancient path built by the dwarves, and invaded the lands of the Detmold. These small realms fell quickly, for their peoples were disorganized. Sebastian subdued the lands to the north and south of the Detmold until he controlled all the land between the mountains and the Straits of Orsal. These conquests took the better part of 6 years, followed by another 2 years in which he refitted his armies and constructed a second fleet to carry his armies into the lands of Ethram. Seeing these events unfold, the Queen of the Elves bid her people leave Aihrde and cross through the rings of brass to the land of Seven Rivers. There they could find peace and safety and bid the world decide its own fate, as ever it had in the past. Many began slipping over the borders of the worlds, to the rivers where they made peace with themselves however they could, for all knew that they had abandoned the world in the face of a horror not seen since the rise of the Red God, for they had seen the darkness that lay upon the Arc of Time. In 726 OY, Sebastian crossed the straits and laid siege to Avignon. The chivalry of the lords of Anglame met him upon the field of battle and threw him back across the sea. The emperor's setback was short-lived, for when he returned, he led his armies in person, and they broke the walls of that high town and drove the great host of knights back into the hinterlands. All the while, Sebastian's fleets ravaged the coast, sacking and burning towns, until most submitted to his rule. Vile Darkness, welcome in. Thank you for the follow. As war rolled across the great straits, the remaining kingdoms gathered in a holy alliance and committed themselves to a crusade against the emperor. King Luther of Keomar abdicated his throne in favor of his son Robert Luther, and taking the Durendale sword into the east, he swore to slay the sorcerer Malazor or the Emperor Sebastian, whichever came near him first. His old companions traveled with him, Aristobulus the White Mage, and Daladon Half-Elven, and a small band of heroes. Their task proved fatal, for Aristobulus fell to a demon lord from the wretched plains, and the companions were slain or lost one by one. Luther, seeing the fall of his many comrades, heeded the gods, and carried the Durandale from the plain into the dreaming sea, there to guard and hide it from the enemy. Daladon Lothian, the lone survivor of the venture, returned to the west, determined to raise more armies and continue the war. He learned then that the elves were choosing to depart, and had been leaving Aihrde for many years. In a rage, Daladon cursed his people and damned them, and the echo of his curses followed many into exile, where they choked on the bitter taste of it. Unknowingly, Daladon cursed his own half-brother, Meltaug Lothian, a prince of the elves. When Meltaug heard his brother's challenge and damnation, it tore a wound in his heart that would not heal. He became possessed of a driving need to battle the evil that surrounded the God Emperor's throne. He left his father in the land of Seven Rivers, returning by secret ways to the world at large. None came with him, but in time he gathered a small band of elves and joined the battle against the east. Thus began one of the greatest epics in the long history of Aihrde. Meltaug was deathless, and he waged his war against evil for 1,000 years and more. In time, his lust for war drove him mad, and he destroyed any and all who stood against his grim purpose. His tale became one that men told in after ages, and was bound in the Lothian chronicles. His was a strange and twisted path that ended as it began, with curses and death. And we did read the epic of Meltaug a little bit earlier. I think we finished it earlier this year. Maybe we'll return to it. In truth, not all the elves fled the world with the queen. Her own daughter, Londia, remained behind with an order of elven warlords called the Lunar Knights. They fought on into the new Rin of the world, though only a few remained when the Winter Dark Wars began. Aside from these, and many others stayed behind, hidden in the deep forests, the deserts, or other wild places. Most notable of these were Nigold, king of the wood elves of the Eldwood. There were others, some growing corrupt by the victories of the dark. These evolved into the Twilight Elves, neither good nor evil, but possessed of a great knowledge of sorcery. In these waning days of the Fifth Rin, Malazor stole away to Castle Kelsion in the far north, where Patrice had come to reside. He sought to end the power of the old mage. The castle lay upon a large hill amidst a wasteland of bogs. Standing water, crowded with the remnants of decay surrounding the castle, spread for many miles through the tundra. The air was cold and hard in the lungs, stinging with each breath. The hint of moisture congealed in the throat. No wind blew. The skies hung pale blue as the mage crossed through the water. Sodden, his cloaks dragging through the mud, Malazor came to the gates and tapped the butt of his staff upon them. "Lord Patrice, it is I, your colleague of old. Come out now so that we might speak. Or better yet, let me in so I might dry by your fire." "It is an ill wind that brings you here, Master Trigal, and no wind blows." The voice came from all about the mage. "I will not be here long, Lord Patrice." The gates swung wide, and beyond them lay the cobbled stones of the courtyard and several archways. Passing through the first, Malazor found himself at steps leading up. Following these, he passed beneath an open door and into a warm, well-lit hall. To one side, upon a bench, sat Patrice. Tall, narrow of limb and chest, he hunched a little in his age. His robes were long and white, though dirtied around the sleeves and feet. His beard he wore short and groomed, and his hair as well. It was white, thin, offering no contrast to the pale skin of the mage. His fingers were black, a sign of the sorcerer's trade. A small fire burned in a hearth in the wall. Malazor took a seat upon another bench and warmed his fingers by the fire. "Yours is a most unpleasant country, Lord Patrice. Why have you settled here?" "It is for the heavens, Master Trigal. I can see the heavens and follow the movements of the sun and moon. On certain days, I can even see the wall of worlds and beyond. If I apply myself, I can see the river of the Allfather, the Arc of Time." "I've seen that river too, but not from Aihrde," Malazor sighed. "It is a pity." "Indeed. Shall we begin, or would you like some refreshments first?" "You have nothing to eat I could digest, Lord Patrice." "That is probably true and just as well, Master Trigal." He said the name with only a slight hint of the power within it, and Patrice pulled upon it, seeking to ensnare Malazor. The mage smiled. "Clever, Lord, very clever, but none know my name, nor will they." Both rose, facing one another, passionless. Malazor lifted his hand and Patrice followed, both unleashing eldritch sorceries that battered the walls and shook the ceiling above. The duel began in a wild hail of fire and water as the two sought mastery over one another. At first, Malazor held the upper hand, for his sorcery was powerful and his knowledge of the Onlook Eroan deep. But Patrice, ever more skilled, drove him from the hall and into the courtyard. He sought to unravel him, to learn his true name, for with this he might bind him. Malazor eluded the sorcery, and struck back with power that shook the building, shattering the pillars so that the awning fell to the courtyard with a crash. The Magi continued their arcane duel. His power unveiled, Patrice summoned lightning and struck Malazor, so that his arm numbed and hung useless. The mage staggered back only to suffer a second lightning strike. Patrice then bound the stunned Malazor in ethereal ropes, lifting him on high, choking the life out of him, but always seeking his name. Malazor held the winter rune, and with it removed himself from the combat, the castle itself, only to reappear in the bogs but beyond the walls. Following him, Patrice slammed his staff upon the ground at his feet so that the earth split. A crack split in the crust, and the water and mud fell into the abyss, and the crack tore the ground asunder, spreading quickly to where Malazor stood gathering himself for his next spell. The mage fell into the crevice and was lost in the drenching bog water that filled the rocky gash. As he fell, his sorcery whipped, striking the walls behind Patrice, and brought them and the mage down in a mound of stone and dust. Bound in a globe of searing white, Patrice staved off the rubble, and he walked through it to where Malazor had vanished. I'm also just gonna really quick. Oh man, I don't think you can see it as nicely as I want you to. But it's raining pretty heavy. This is awesome. Anyway. Where was I? Malazor rose from the ground like an avenging demon, and he lashed fire upon Patrice, burning away the globe. The two clashed again, casting sorcery one upon the other as they both rose into the air. They hurled bolts, whips of flame, ice, and eldritch powers from beyond the world of Aihrde. In the end, Patrice gave out, his sorcery proving no match for the might of Malazor, so that he fell to ruin. Malazor, tired and battered, cast on high, and pulled forth magic from the firmament, and bound Patrice in a piece of it. "My friend, you shall not die. Not this day, not the next, nor for many long days ever after. I shall set you on high so that all the world may see you, and you it. In later ages, men will look up in the dead of night and see that none may suffer to live without me, unless they suffer greatly." Malazor hurled Patrice into the heavens. Using the winter rune, he cast him into the void, where he resides still, or so it is said, as a light in the sky, circling the world as it came to be every 13 years. Ever after, Malazor's men called him the Archmage, and he was the greatest mage of the world for a long time. The Emperor in these days began to fear the power of the Archmage, and because of this, he forged a blade of Eargild metal and imbued it with arcane powers. By secret ways, he stole himself into King Luther's old land of Pendegrants, where the Holy Flame resided, and he bathed the blade in the language of creation. So great was the heat of flame that the steel of the blade turned fiery red, and Sebastian lay spells of unmaking into the receptive metal. The magic mingled with the language and bound the spell of unmaking with the blade, so that ever after, the Emperor felt secure against the powers of the mage, and it was after said that blade, oh, there we go, okay, now I understand. And it was after said that blade, Decipero, was the only blade that might strike at the heart of darkness and drive it into the wilderness. With the white mage fallen to a demon lord, and Patrice cast out, the Ilarios proved too weak to combat the White Order of Malazor. In the end, one of their own, Ozana, betrayed them. They were overwhelmed, some slain in their towers, others bound to the darkness. Those survivors fled and hid themselves away, to return and fight another day. Only a few remained to stand against the powers of the Emperor and the Archmage. Daladon Half-Elven and Jaren, alone of all the great heroes of that day, stood in defiance. Though sorrow followed, for even before they could rally, the Half-Elven fell to a dragon in the south. Jaren bore his body back to his home in the Eldwood, laying it upon the ground at the feet of the great oak. There, the tree consumed his body and soul, harboring it for another day and other battles. Jaren returned to Robert Luther's side and bound himself to the fate of that greatest of kings. Robert Luther ruled all the lands of the ancient Ethvold, from the southern coasts to the Gotland. The great wall of old they repaired, and manned with all the many diverse peoples driven from the Anglame and the east into a holy alliance. It connected the inner city with the long fence of the Bergrucken Mountains, that in turn crossed the whole land to the Amber Sea. Hey Bean, welcome in. Even beyond the fence, the people of the Massif and the Lechtenfield swore their allegiance to Robert Luther and braced themselves for the terror they knew must surely come. Robert Luther was young then, and in his prime. He was a knight of great renown, never once unseated from his horse, nor fallen victim to the bloody field. He gathered all beneath his banners that would come, and at the head of the Holy Alliance he defied the Emperor and taunted him to come and battle. All stood in awe of the power of the son of Luther, and none would answer his challenge. The emperor knew he could not best him in the field, for his might was great, and the size of his host uncounted. For his part, Malazor suffered doubt, for Robert Luther's might, but also that of Sebastian, as the emperor's power had waxed upon Aihrde, and it was not bound to him as he had hoped. In this breathless moment, all three stood aloft in their towers, keeps, and castles, and waited for what must surely come. So stood the powers of the world, when at last Malazor, in his towers upon the Aihrde, used the winter rune to break the seals upon the gates and travel the paths of Umbra to summon the darkness to the world of Aihrde. And man, oh man, I know that we've got 10 minutes left, but I feel like that's just a really great place to stop. And next week we'll come back to it, unless we've received the next chapter of Pools of Dunhollow from Steve, then we'll do that. But yeah, next time we are back here, we will read about the Feast of Death, which is when it's when the tragedy happens, I believe. How dare you leaving wanting more? It's my job! It's my day job. I will put it on my resume. Is a literary tease, unfortunately. But this was super wonderful. Thank you all so much for hanging out. I do want to toss us a raid. Thank you for the digital company while I was working on my CNC game. Dude, hell yeah. How's it going? Are you having fun? That sounds awesome. I was editing Davis's interview today, and now that is on YouTube. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm doing a little series on YouTube on Trollard Games' channel of like interviews with as many of the trolls as I can get to wrangle for an hour. And I've done Chuck, Jeremy, and Jason's interview, and those are all up. And then today, Davis's interview went up. He's the co-creator of Castles and Crusades, and we came up in that interview with a really great idea for a campaign, because there were, he said, like guilds that would go into battlefields and like retrieve lost equipment and then go and sell it on a secondary market. And I said, that is a fucking awesome idea for a campaign. And then we talked about it a little bit. So definitely go and watch the interview with Davis if you want some really good like campaign inspiration. He's the guy who did it. He did the whole game with Matt Golden, so he knows a thing or two. We are going to raid a friend of mine who I didn't even realize I wasn't following before now. So we're going to go and give him some love. Alec the Bard is currently, I believe, working on villains, he says. Yeah, making some D&D bosses. So we're going to talk tabletop RPGs. If you have a moment to spare to like interact with the streamer and just say a nice thing. I know I say this every time, but it really does mean a lot to all the streamers that get raided into and then like interacted with by the raiders. So let's go and give some love. It'll be super nice. Alex, great. I think that's about it. I'll be back here on Monday. Tomorrow, Tuesday, Steve has his AMA. Wednesday is a world building stream with Chuck. Thursday is all of the trolls, and then we do stuff Friday, but I don't remember what it is. And every Wednesday on twitch.tv/HearthCoven we have like an actual play game that we play. So we're doing 5e right now and are going to switch to Castles and Crusades after we wrap up this, which is Curse of Strahd that we're playing right now, and it's a lot of fun. So come hang out with us on HearthCoven Games, and we're just going to do the raid. So thank you so much. This was super fun, and I'll see you next week.